your tears and sorrow.
Spoke too soon.
Leave your field to flower.
Pippin? It's a Pippin funeral?
Hello, lovers, and welcome back to And Just Like That, The Writer's Room, the official companion podcast of And Just Like That from Max. I'm Michael Patrick King, writer, director, and executive producer of And Just Like That. And in the writing room with me today is the executive producer and writer, Elisa Zuritsky.
Hello.
And executive producer and writer, Susan Fales-Hill.
Hello.
And co-executive producer and writer, Samantha Irby.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. Well, the title of this episode, this is episode 6, and it's called Silent Mode. So in view of that word silent, I would like to now caution everyone who hasn't seen this episode to put us on silent right now and go and look at it, because this episode in particular has a lot of surprises and reveals in it. So, Susan, you want to talk about the title Silent Mode?
Well, the title comes from your iPhone and putting it on silent mode, but it's also a symbol of the ultimate silence, which is death.
And also, interesting enough, there are 2 characters in this episode that are being silent. Charlotte is not talking about something, and Aiden is not talking about something. So it's one of those titles that sort of has roots in every storyline.
Yes.
But it starts with rain. There is nothing more decadent that a writer can type than the words, "It's raining." It costs money.
Those 2 words.
It was
are
a
very
dark
expensive.
and stormy night.
I mean, rain is so important because it really sort of introduces reality into any fiction. And all of a sudden you feel them. If you're in rain, you feel differently. When you see and hear rain, you feel differently. But thanks to our production, they understood the power of the word. And when we say it's raining, it's raining.
And it's raining events in this episode as well.
It is.
And can I just add something behind the scenes for viewers? What you have to understand is that that entire townhouse is built indoors, and even the garden is indoors. So making it rain inside is even more,
Yes, because
sure,
underneath
decadent.
the garden, we had to create a drainage system so that by the end of the season, everyone doesn't have mold. But so it's this elaborate process that starts with the word rain, and then production chases, how is that possible? And the reason we wanted rain is a plot device. We wanted to trap them inside.
And by them, we mean Carrie, of course, and Duncan.
Right. And it's a real contrivance. Writing is contriving. You have to create circumstances. We have this character who basically pushed her away in the last episode. There was a little crack in the door opening when they both realized they were writing things they weren't comfortable with. There was anxiety in the house. And how we thought, how do we get this to move forward without crossing boundaries?
And how do we get into Duncan's apartment, Duncan's abode, and get a peek into how he lives?
Yeah, and that abode is quite an abode. I mean, it feels not like Carrie's house. It has weight to it.
Well, I remember you're giving the designers the inspiration that it was inhabited by somebody who was a professor of Asian American studies who was abroad on leave.
Yeah,
so it's kind of the polar opposite of Carrie's bright.
Right. It has, if you look around closely, it has a feeling of an elder professor. And by the way, the premise of the show is that Duncan just comes here to write. And that's the contrast. Carrie writes and lives, and he just writes and puts himself in a gulag. And this is the gulag, this prison, and she's eating basically gulag food, mutton.
Mutton stew. Yeah, what everyone just can't wait to taste. We're
It's
putting the
visceral.
recipe
Like when you're
on
watching
a
her
website.
eat it, you're like, oh no, I can taste how bad that tastes.
It's true.
It's a struggle.
I mean, Sarah Jessica is chewing and swallowing like she's eating hoofs and carrots. But the point is, we wanted to introduce a little of him and a little of her. But the real insecurity of that they both share is that they're both writing something new. And our hook was that he's writing about a woman for the first time. So
he's a biographer.
And he's a biographer. And he's opening himself up in an uncharacteristic way to ask someone to read something that isn't finished.
Yep. And he's writing about Margaret Thatcher, and he's probably not in line with her politics. So
Right.
it's a big stretch for him.
And then we also had to write the book as well while he was writing the book. Susan, you write historical books every now and then, books
Yes,
based
I
on
do.
history.
And so I did a deep dive on Margaret Thatcher. And the factoid that we didn't include that I'm really sorry about is that she was the inventor of Mr. Whippy's soft ice cream, which for those who don't like Margaret Thatcher, there's something in her favor.
Yeah, right. Well, that's a good thing, Mr. Whippies. And that's the kind of writing room, that's the kind of in-depth study. Susan's like, I think we need to put Mr. Whippy in the show.
We talked so much about that ice cream.
I know. It made it into at least one of the drafts.
One of the drops. These are the gems that are left on the cutting room floor.
And one of our tricks and very strict guardrails with Carrie is that we had to make sure from day one that Carrie and Duncan were from the neck up. They were thinking people. They were writers, right down to the wardrobe. Every time you see Carrie, we would go over it and over and over it. She can't even have a flounce.
Right.
Because the audience, we believe, is waiting for something.
Whenever there's a handsome man, and let's face it, Duncan may not be able to cook, but he looks like he can cook between the sheets.
Man, he can cook, girl. But the idea is we had to keep them as book people. And that's why the rain and the bad food really doesn't feel pleasant.
And I really have to give a big shout out to our music people because the selection of that string piece that feels bolero-esque without the sex and like a challenge and a duel, and you can see these two people sussing each other out, it really underscores the kind of tentative approach that we were looking for.
And it also gives you a real insight into the type of music he puts on when he writes. He is dark.
Yes.
He has a dark, heavy, tortured
Energy,
writing soul, whereas she's probably upstairs listening to, Little Richard or something when she writes.
Of all the things you could have said, little
Well, it was the
Richard.
opposite of dark. So we cut from this basically scene that we gave ourselves permission to put them together and to move them forward without taking them out socially, because that would have been perceived as a date, that we put them in this world and we go upstairs to Carrie and we see her and Aiden in their world, which is basically she's got a writer underneath her and she has a boyfriend far away, and they're in the absolute ordinariness of rituals before they go to bed. She's cleaning out her medicine cabinet. He's brushing his teeth. And they're just
And applying Rogaine, don't forget.
John Corbett's choice. He was like, hey, wouldn't it be great if I did Rogaine? Because remember in the episode where I was doing Rogaine back in the closet, and she's like, you have Rogaine on your head? And I'd be like, what? Don't talk about my stuff. Don't touch my stuff. So he's like, what if I did Rogaine? And that's a kind of like thinking that people do, like these actors bring years of history with them, and it's twinkly to see him do that.
And they're willing to make fun of themselves.
Yeah.
And important plot point, she's eating her last Tums because she has acid reflux.
Which is the first time we've ever seen Carrie with a gastro anything.
Right. Well,
a very exciting moment for the gastrointestinal
And my
community.
mission is complete.
But to me, underneath the Tums is an unrest. There's an
anxiety.
acid, there's an
Not to
anxiety
mention
that happens. Mutton to start. Acid reflux of the lamb.
By the way, I don't predict mutton to trend after this episode.
I don't either. It'll be one of the few things Carrie Bradshaw touches that doesn't go viral.
Tums is about to skyrocket. though.
Yeah, exactly.
But the point is that underneath everything is another thought. And underneath the actual funniness of, it was so bad I have to have Tums, then we just chase that down the road. But the other big reveal in this scene that's important is that Aiden announces that Wyatt is going to Outward Bound, which means that we have conveniently,
He has
as
a
writers,
vacation.
cleared space for him to come. Because the last time we saw this family, it was like, he can't go anywhere.
Exactly. So this is a big breakthrough. It's a great moment of hope.
There's no guilt attached, we think.
Yes. And it's a buoyant moment.
Yeah.
It's a buoyant moment. And the other interesting thing in the scene, writing-wise, it says he chose it. He decided to go. So it feels like we're telling the audience, oh, this is getting better. He's getting maybe better. This is us saying it's going to work, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the
No
clouds
question.
are parting.
Indeed. It's raining, but a rainbow's coming.
Yeah.
It actually gives him permission to be single. Like it gives him permission. His son deciding to go away gives him permission to be Aiden and Carrie versus Carrie and Aiden and his family.
Of course, all the parents are in the audience are saying, when is the shoe going to drop?
Outward bound doesn't
The
sound.
reprieve never lies.
Everybody uses Rogaine. They're like, when is the Rogaine going to get in his eye? So we cut from this night scene with thunder still rolling and cuteness, and we come into Miranda waking up with Socrates and Sappho. Now, I mean, these two Italian greyhounds, to me, they look like somebody drew them for the New Yorker. Every time I see them, they look like an illustration. They don't look real.
It's the best casting that you've ever done in your entire career.
Don't tell Richard Burton that. Because these two dogs, which are very, very supposedly highly strung, were adorable. And they moved in unison. But what I love is Miranda is in bed with Joy's children.
And we also love Miranda, who's so self-possessed and brilliant and strong, worried that these creatures don't like her.
Yes.
And Joy, who is so delightfully honest, says, oh, no, they're still on the fence. Like, what I love about Joy is she's just like, you're right. They don't like you. You're right. And get out of my house is what she's saying.
And
In the nicest possible way.
The ultimate line from Miss Samantha Irby, Miranda saying, I don't want to become a lesbian cliche.
And move in after the first date, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it takes one to know one.
And just as you're looking at the scene, it's so beautiful, and there's so much thought gone into it. Joy's bedroom was designed so that Miranda looks good in it. It's blue against her red hair. We wanted the audience to see, oh, that looks comfortable. She looks great there. And she presents to Joy the new apartment, which Joy doesn't even look at. And I love Dolly's line readings of pretty much everything. But when she says, just get out, the hard softness of her is unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
And then Miranda brings up her son for the first time. If you're a payer attention to subtext, look at what Dolly does when Miranda says, I want you to meet my son. She barely responds, which is odd for a character who responds a lot.
Well, we had such fun discovering that character and writing her and figuring out where her fault lines were and what her attitude was and what her emotional reticence might be. And she's a little bit of an enigma. She's charming, but we don't know when she says, get out. She's joking, but isn't she joking?
Yeah, and the other...
She's not joking.
Which is why we love her. Yeah, it's quite an interesting thing to create a new character and kind of show, oh, she has boundaries. But what's important about the scene to me is the opposite of a lot of people we've seen Miranda with, a lot of people in bed. She seems completely comfortable, even with the uncomfortableness of, I got to get out of here because I'm a lesbian cliche. There's nothing hidden. Except that Joy is hiding, maybe, I don't like children, which we'll discover later as we go on into the episode. And we leave this very lovely scene and we see Charlotte walking to the Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. The Harry storyline is continuing, and it's, cancer is heavy. And when you're writing heavy stuff, you're always looking for a way to lighten it.
Hence her big dramatic Jackie O sunglasses, because she thinks this is a way that no one will recognize her in her own neighborhood.
She's
walking
now-
into a cancer center, the most famous cancer center in New York.
With the words Cancer Center written on
Yeah.
the wall. And out comes what we consider our screwball comedy heroine, our delightful meringue, Bitsy Von Muffling, played by Julie Halston. So if you have someone who's heavy, we wanted to bring someone in who's light, chasing it. And it really does turn into a screwball comedy at this moment.
As Charlotte, whom, as we know, has been sworn to secrecy, back to our title, Silent Mode, has to explain why she's going into Memorial Sloan Kettering.
But it's not cancer.
But it's not. I'm not here for cancer. Well, I am as a volunteer, but no one I know has it.
And no, you can't volunteer. No, we have enough. I'm sure there aren't any slots
Yeah,
for
there's
other
a
people.
volunteer limit. And
Comedy writing 101, methinks the lady doth protest too much, is always a winner.
Yeah, it is. And then we bring up this Tea Time at Tiffany event. And I mean, God, you have no idea how much is it a big event? Is it a small event? Are we going to go to Tiffany? Are we not going to go to Tiffany's? And we decided we're going to go to Tiffany. And we just thought the funny thing would be Charlotte's so not in her conscious head, her social head. All she's thinking is, don't say cancer, don't say cancer. So she makes a social faux pas.
Well, and we have to give a big nod to our friend Elisa Zuritsky, who had pitched the notion of
Who?
Remember her?
Oh, that Lisa.
That one
Yes.
over there. My little stint with verbal incontinence as we begin. Well, my brush with it happened a few years ago. I think it was right on the heels of production had ended, and or maybe I was in the middle of production. But let's just say production is a little stressful, and my brain is moving at a mile a minute, and I'm tired, and I'm haven't slept, and everything is just flying around. And I went through this stage where, and I have known for 30 years, maybe more, to never talk about an event with people who you're not sure were invited. And I must
I'm sorry,
have...
you learned that as a 2-year-old?
Did we
I
all?
probably learned it too late in my
Your
20s or 30s. But anyhow, I think of myself as pretty good at that kind of thing. And there were several months where I just kept doing it. I kept looking in someone's face and saying, well, yeah, you'll be at, Josie's party. No, I wasn't invited. It kept happening over and over and over, and it was the most mortifying stint. So this kind of fit perfectly.
Well, it's so interesting. Every
into-
now and then somebody has a story that you just go, well, that's happening.
yeah, write it down immediately and then make it into something.
That's the gold.
That's the goal.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, one of the requirements of this show and Sex and the City was bring your stuff, bring your embarrassing, your personal stuff. Not, I heard a story on TV about something. Like, no, I'm humiliated. We built the entire Sex and the City canon of writing on being humiliated as single people. And as we continually go, it's
Guess
very...
what? Humiliation doesn't end when you're married. Guess what?
That's why there's and just like that.
Or when you get older and more mature.
Yeah.
But it is really important, the personal excavation of not only your embarrassment, but poetically your pain
Mm-hmm.
and your life is what you bring to the writing room table, or else you're not there.
Yeah.
But this became the perfect way to illustrate how discombobulated Charlotte, who is our Miss Manners, our Emily Post, is.
And
that she
also
has
to
forgotten
set
about
up
her.
how delicate people are about accepting or not being invited to things. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Bitsy is thrown and angry, and she's going to do something about it. And as she leaves, she does a Preston Sturgis, who is a screwball comedy genius director. She goes, no, I'll see you. You'll see. And then it cuts into, for any unknown reason except Susan Fales-Hill wanted it, Diana Ross flooding the score with Touch Me in the Morning and then just walk away to illustrate
Yep.
the camp drama that Sema is going
Pathos.
through.
The
Nay,
pathos. When a woman has to part with her chauffeur. It's as bad
I mean,
as
I
parting with
wept.
your hair
People-
colorist.
I
think-
wept
think-
through that.
I think everyone can relate
I
to
think
that
everyone
pain.
can relate to that pain.
Yeah,
Plus,
there
you
were
get
2
that,
funerals on this
you
episode.
get that lush, gorgeous, evocative song in the show, and then you own it by putting it on her phone. And she's listening to it as she says goodbye to Rocco, or as Sarita pronounces his name, Rocco.
Rocco.
Like Rocco. But the idea is her most successful and longest relationship with a man is her driver. interestingly enough.
Mhm.
Because he's useful and he doesn't talk much.
Never said a word. And the idea that she has to break up with him says to the audience through our lens, she's letting go of her attached identity.
Mhm.
Having a chocolate brown Mercedes with your name on the vanity plate, to let go of that is us really tearing away, like in a melodrama, like Not Without My Daughter. Sally Field, like, take your daughter away.
Who is Sema without her car? This
No,
is
but
what we wanted to find
But
out.
the truth, that is
Yeah.
the truth. She is now, in my opinion, a princess in exile.
Mhm. She's lost her chariot.
Yeah.
She's walking.
And her shoes were not made for walking.
Yeah.
No, and the idea that she's still holding on to the faith that I'll come back for you, it's so poetic.
But she doesn't make him promise to wait 5 years for her.
No.
Unlike other people we know.
That's because she's
She's like, you
realistic.
can do Uber until I'm solvent again.
But she says, take my vanity plates, which is like, I'm coming
I'm coming
back.
back.
Yes.
I
And
will
then-
return. This-
And she says, it's so melodramatic, Susan. It is so
I know.
It
It's
is so
perfect.
perfumed in such a camp,
Well, and
delicious way.
the way she struts into the building.
Oh, the way she
To
gets
the
out of the
lyrics.
car
I
and
won't-
slams
yeah.
the door and the wind, and she's like,
If I've
I
got to
won't-
be strong.
I won't look back.
I won't look
I won't look back.
I won't look back. The strength of her and then her martyrdom. But then you go right into another thing that we've never really experienced is the Miranda Sema dynamic.
Yeah, that was fun to put them alone together.
Yeah, we really wanted
Yeah.
to get them
No.
together.
And the pragmatist with
Right.
the grande dame.
Right.
This has a line in this scene that I think is so fantastic, and I can't stop saying it, is when Sema tells her that she has to pay over asking, and Miranda goes,
Oh, well, I don't believe in that.
Don't believe in what?
The whole offer over asking thing, it's gross.
the idea of Miranda, this human rights worker, this beautiful adult with a child and a life going, no, that's gross. I now say that's gross about everything.
She's morally opposed.
No, she
It's
is.
very Miranda
Yes.
to have a stance on real estate
Mhm.
overpricing.
Totally.
There's no question. There's the hint of this is what's wrong with our society.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
people
It
cannot
felt
afford.
very real.
Mhm.
Exactly. So
And now the apartment itself is spectacular because it had to be. Because we knew as writers of this show that we were not going to do two characters furnishing an apartment. So we actually had
Yeah.
the design team create the perfect Miranda apartment with furniture already in place because we didn't want to see two empty apartments.
but that's my pitch for a spin-off. And just like that home decoration edition.
Oh my God.
I mean,
and
literally,
ancillary
seriously.
product.
because at the end of the episode, she says, I will offer over asking and ask how much they want for the furniture. Because we really, it's so technical. We believe reality so
Yeah.
much that if she moved into an empty apartment, then we'd have to see Carrie with an empty apartment. So we just try to remedy
It's
it through the
also
power
true
of the
to-
word.
The true to the character, I don't see her as
Mhm.
someone who's a home decor enthusiast.
No,
She's
she
very
would not
practical.
find that fun.
No.
She's not into her stuff as much.
It's not her thing.
Yeah.
And she throws the gauntlet to Sema. You're brilliant. You're great. You'll find me what I want.
I just want to kind of go back in time and just realize or remember how long we spent in the writer's room just trying to figure out Miranda's real estate puzzle of like, she's leaving the brownstone. So what does that mean? Because that could mean a million things in New York.
Remember at one point
Yeah.
we were saying she was on a wait list for Manhattan Plaza.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which
there
is
was.
which is
For
a
30
building in
years.
Manhattan that
Right.
it's artists. And we were going to do a story that her name finally came up that she put up in the in the late '80s, and she had to pretend she was an actor
Right,
to
right.
get in because
There's
it's all a lie.
so many.
But this is emblematic
Yeah.
of how real these people are to us. And we
Mhm,
discuss them at
mhm.
length.
And
Yeah.
at length, that area, which is Murray Hill, which is near the Human Rights Watch
Which
offices.
is, by the way, in the Empire State Building.
Right.
Yep.
So we wanted to locate where Miranda could walk to work and have an apartment in that area. And this is just all stuff we do to make it real for us. And somehow it trickles down and becomes real to the designers. Like, okay, what's a building in Murray Hill look like? Okay, what would Miranda like in this building? Oh, that's a really pretty color for her. So it's this, it all, again, starts from the word. And the word that we put into the show regarding Harry is now looming big, which is cancer. And when it comes to prostate cancer, there are a couple of ways to go. And we did enormous amounts of research on the 2 ways to go. And we decided to go the surgery route. Because we decided that that's in the next scene. He says, let's just get it over with. And the idea is that in both cases, there's a potential, as Charlotte Wood says, potential erectile dysfunction, potential bowel problems. And I think in a situation like this, sometimes you just need a Pollyanna.
And that's what she is in that scene. Charlotte just really rises to the occasion with her pom-poms saying, we're going to be great.
I mean, that's kind of, when you're in a situation where there's one of you is sick, doesn't somebody have to hold the truth?
Yeah.
Well,
of
this is
the possibility that it would be real? Because you're certainly holding the truth of it. Might not go good, right?
Yeah.
But it's such a joy to write that long-term marriage. And this is one of the emblematic moments of a long-term marriage, that something's really going wrong and one person has to be there to hoist the other person up.
Absolutely.
And speaking of long-term marriages, here we have our other very long-term happy marriage, which is LTW and Herbert Wexley. And we have thrown a little bit of a, I would say, trap in front of LTW by putting Marion, this sexy, very, very capable editor. He's not a himbo. He's really good at his job. And he's in front of her, and she is acknowledging that.
It's like being on a diet and being in front of a big, fat chocolate croissant that you're not supposed to eat.
And all day in a small
space.
A small dark space.
No kidding.
And your
mind meld.
Mind melding.
So she's married to someone she adores, but who doesn't necessarily want to hear all day long about how she put together an episode of this 10-part series on African-American first.
Yes.
And the other thing is someone who helps you.
Yes, exactly.
Makes it easier and excites
and better.
you.
And keeps making it better.
So speaking of the personal, I was desperate to show, because no one talks about the wayward desires of happily married women. This is a taboo subject. It's as if once you say, I do.
There's your spinoff podcast. the wayward desires of happily married women, Susan Fales-Hill.
Come and tell me your sexual fantasy. So it, to me, was so exciting to explore. This is a happily married woman. They're not having huge problems in their marriage.
Yeah.
She's a good girl. And the shock for someone in that situation when she's finally confronted with, oh my goodness, big fat temptation in the form of this very, very lovely gentleman.
And you know, when you're in a writing room and when you're running the show, you have to really take in other people's thrusts, like, no pun intended, but like,
well, do I? Must I?
Wayward men.
But the point is, I would have never thought to do this.
We had to fight pretty hard to
against
convince
me.
you.
Yeah, it's like, of all the stories that we did this season, this is the one I was like, why are we throwing trouble at Lisa and Herbert? We like them. We're already giving Harry cancer. Why are we giving her relationship polyps? You know, like, what is going on?
That it's tension, and it's, you know,
everyone
and it's so really, I mean,
everyone has had a work crush. Or am I speaking just for
real.
myself?
Well, I have 3, and they're at the table with me right now.
For the record, I have not. But
that's rough. That's embarrassing, because I just claimed you as one of mine. But okay, I understand you're married. You have to
Elisa's
pretend.
lying. Her husband is listening. She
But
knows
no, it
she's
was
a
so
crush.
important. And as we went along,
no, I fought really hard.
I think it's interesting, because I almost feel like it's the most dangerous story we did. Of all of them this year, this is the most dangerous. And I kept leaning into like Samantha going, yeah, we're doing it. And Susan going, we're doing it. And Elisa going, you're doing it. I was like, okay, but like, why are
I
we
wanted
doing
to take it further, but Susan was like, absolutely not. I
But
thought
where
I
would
would
you
have
have taken it?
to Smoochland.
No, that's
well, Smoochland.
This is how it sounds in
So
the room.
I'm-
I say something crazy, and then Susan's like, no.
I said wayward thoughts, not wayward tongue.
Yeah, Susan.
Well, no, it just has to
Susan
be
wants her
you know
cake,
what I
her
mean.
chocolate cake croissant, and eat it too. She wants
She
it,
just
but
wants to
she
look
just
at
takes
it
a
and
little nibble of
fantasize
the
about it.
she
croissant,
doesn't
just
want to
a
gain
little
weight
bite.
about it, but she does want to have a little taste of
But
it.
by the way,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the kiss, the little Smoochland thing was wound up, is how we wound up with Charlotte getting smooched at that club for,
Yeah.
Yes,
in episode
there was
3.
there was smooch waiting somewhere.
And that was not exactly consensual
Samantha came into
smooching.
work every day going, one of these married ladies is getting kissed.
No,
And now
that is
I'm
for real.
making it
In the
happen.
first day in the room, I was like, I have an idea. Could Charlotte kiss someone?
Yeah.
Harry. And everyone was like, you're fired.
Well, and I actually originally wanted the wayward thoughts to be Charlotte's. And
Mhm.
that
But
was
then the cancer,
the
has to
cancer.
had to happen.
Well, I mean, but the idea being that in this moment, at least, they're connecting on a creative level. And so the phone call from Chauncey, who is Herbert's campaign manager, who wants her to do more, I don't know, baklava tasting in Queens or bowling
Well,
or what.
it's the dreary drudgery of campaigning and having to go
Yeah.
to all these sort of local events, and she doesn't have time for it.
And then
she's-
she does the most scary thing that you even said. She even says in the show.
this breaking the sacred rule of mothers everywhere. I'm putting my phone on silent mode.
Yeah.
May I be the human footnote for a moment and just talk about
Sure. I'm sure it's well pedicured, whatever it is. This foot that you're going to note.
just want to talk for a minute about her 10-part series, which, much like everything else that we discuss in depth, we know what's in all 10 parts of this series. Anyone who wants to option the actual series is also welcome to do so.
The notes exist.
And it's really kind of necessary now.
It is. And
Mhm.
on the screen is Edmonia Lewis, who was the first African-American female sculptor of international renown in the 19th century. She was African-American and Native American. So,
I mean, the idea that here's the fun and awful thing about writing. You throw an idea out and then it becomes something you have to do.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden now we're in an editing room and we have to create a 10-part docuseries that is legit seeming, or
Mhm.
else everything LTW is doing is
Fake.
stupid.
Mhm.
and again, for the writers out there, the more you create the real world of your character, the more you have to draw from. So we
Mhm.
actually have the document of what her series is so that we could use it as a point of reference, not only visually, but for her in dialogue.
And also to give to production and say, we have to make this reality. Because to make it even more complicated, there are 7 screens in there in the editing room, and they all have to be filled with legitimate, I'm a serious filmmaker. And we're putting light on a lot of people that have never been seen on those screens.
Well, and one of the things I love about this show is, as our producer John Melfi says, everything is handmade and everything is authentic. So if you look at the bookshelves, the books are real. We don't just dummy it in. And you can always feel on a show when
Yeah.
things are hamburger helpered. So
yeah. And now, speaking of Chuck meat, we go to Hot Fellas. And we start in classic and just like that, on a crotch shot of Giuseppe in his onesie. And we show that Anthony's business is taking off. Like she says, it's like the Barney sale, but instead of Balenciaga, it's bread. But she's carrying a coffee to Charlotte. And she puts it on the table and says, here's your coffee, double. I'm exhausted. Like Carrie is not a waitress on anybody's restaurant.
Yeah, that might be the first time in Sex and the City history that she's brought a coffee to someone else.
Yeah. So she sits down and she's sort of at the table watching the Sema Miranda real estate dance.
Right, their business relationship that she was, by the way, worried about.
Yes, she didn't want it. It's like
She
not
didn't
wanting to
want
fix
it to
two
happen.
people up.
Yes, yes.
And in the middle of this announcement that Sema's found Miranda the perfect place in the neighborhood, Charlotte's phone rings and she overreacts. She says, it's Harry and I gotta
Take
this.
over
I'm going to take it,
her.
but I'm going to
Right.
take it over there just
and
because
it's nothing. He does this all the time, but you see Carrie
Yes.
look like
Yeah,
that's
Carrie
she
weird.
absolutely
registers.
clocks
She
that
clocks
reaction.
that. That's weird.
And it's back to also the verbal incontinence because
Right.
she's just talking too much. There's no reason to
Right,
explain for 12 sentences to your best friends why you're getting up to take a call or who's calling you. She
right.
could have just gotten up.
Right. And here comes Aiden. Now, I want to say something as the person who runs the writing room. You know, we beat all these shows out. We beat each other up in the writing room. We know what we're going away with to write, the outlines. We know what the big, bold strokes are. We know what's expected. And every now and then, something comes in that is pure inspiration from that writer when they're writing that you do not expect. And Susan came in with this idea in the script. She already put it in the script that Aiden throws a pebble at the window and it breaks. Now, that is so odd and specific that it can only come from being in the moment.
Being in the moment, drawing on the beautiful history that you created, because he used to throw pebbles at her window to get her attention. And one of our other writers, Lucas Froelich, had originally come up with the idea that this was going to be the perfect weekend. He was going to try to make the perfect weekend out of this and try too hard. And so I thought, what would somebody who's trying to create the perfect moment, you would want to recapture the past and say, here we are,
right.
we're forever, this is my forever love gesture, and it goes horribly wrong.
Yeah, no, and aside from the fact that it's arresting, because it's thrilling, it's also, next to rain, the hardest thing you could do in production is to break
Oh,
a window, break
Yeah.
glass and worry about the glass and how it shatters and what the glass is and all this. But in reality, what he's breaking is them. The idea of our thing. He says it's our thing. He's broken something now. And what we all know in silent mode, what he's not saying is, I broke our deal.
Yep.
I broke
our
our
trust. Yeah.
I betrayed you by sleeping with Kathy, quote unquote, accidentally.
Yeah.
But the manifestation of the top layer of the writing is it breaks. And then underneath is
All the emotion.
the reality of the symbolism of I broke us.
Yeah.
So,
I
Susan,
broke the rainbow because the rainbow is in the glass.
Yes.
I broke the fantasy.
yeah.
And then the desperate attempt to fix it, which
Yeah.
is the emphasis is on the wrong syllable. It's not the glass, it's the relationship that has its cracks.
And Elisa, you're going to say
No,
something?
I was just wondering because I too was really, really aware of that almost divine
It
inspiration
is
you
so
had.
delightful.
And I'm just wondering because I remember you went off to do the outline.
Yes.
And do you do you remember when it came to you? What if he
I just,
What-
because I'm always putting
Mhm.
myself in the character's
Mhm.
shoes
Mhm.
and I'm picturing him coming and I just thought of that as such a beautiful romantic gesture.
But it
and
flies
was their
in,
youth.
right?
Yeah.
It flies
Yeah.
in.
It
just
flies
it
in.
flies in when
Mhm.
you're in the moment
that's when
and
you-
you're in the reality
That's
of.
when you feel.
and then did you think, ooh, yeah.
I did think, ooh, and I did, to your point, Michael, the symbolism of shattering what's
Mhm.
supposed to be a perfectly romantic moment and gesture.
But
And
the idea of something flying in is that is the thrill of every now and then the wind brings something in and you don't know where it came from. When I was writing the finale of the Sex and the City series, I was sitting at the computer writing, and all of a sudden, he was always Mr. Big, and all of a sudden, in my head, out of nowhere came, his name is John. Just say his name is John. Just like, okay,
yeah.
who's ever sending that in, the antenna, I get it.
But it is
Surprising.
It comes out of the 99%
Yeah.
perspiration. It's
Right.
all of the hours,
Yeah.
but it's really putting yourself in the skin
When
and in
people
the
say,
shoes.
how do you write Carrie? How do you write these people? What you have to realize is you are those people
Mhm.
Yeah.
when you're writing them, right, Samantha?
Yeah. Every time I write Carrie, and Carrie and I could not be more different physiologically, but I do feel like I'm Carrie Bradshaw. I feel like she inhabits me when I'm in her scenes. And then when I can like immediately switch to Miranda, I feel all of them. And I think we all like feel we know these people as well as we know like actual people in our lives. And so it's easy to kind of step into their shoes and
And
say what they would
the
say.
joy of it is that everybody's Carrie is Carrie, but they're Carrie. It's like Elisa writes
Mhm,
Carrie
mhm.
this way, Susan writes her this way, I write her this way, Sam writes her this way. We all write Carrie, but we bring our take on it. But in order to write any show, I think,
Mhm.
that's emotionally based, you have to feel the truth of what could possibly be happening. Otherwise, you don't have anything to paint with. What are
Yeah.
you doing?
Yeah.
No.
You know, and the other fun thing about this scene for me is the idea that there's broken glass everywhere and Carrie's barefoot. Because what's really happening is underneath her, she's already fulfilling the demands of another man and trying to make his life easier by she cares for him as a writer, so she doesn't want to disrupt him.
Right. Now
So-
she's being considerate.
Consider because they're both writers and they
Yeah.
both understand, but he doesn't even like careful, you're going to get hurt. I mean, everything he says in this scene is about him.
Mhm.
You're going to get hurt. Now you're making me feel worse. And she just keeps going on. And John Melfi, who's our executive producer, and kind of like a heat-seeking missile for the emotions of the show, whenever he sees this scene, he's like, come on, Carrie, stop talking about the window. You're making him feel worse. Like he's like really like, oh, she shouldn't have said that. Like he's like really feeling the beating up
He's
over that window.
empathizing so much
Which
with
she buys-
feeling bad, with
Yeah.
feeling guilty.
And she
Yeah.
doesn't know. It's just a window. But, you
Right.
know, it is this delicate
Yeah.
spun glass. And she is investigating in her head now 1846, 1846. Special
Yeah.
time, special time.
Right. Yeah, she's fallen in love with that jewel box.
Now, when you're writing characters and when you're writing life, you try to have a balance of light and dark, comedy and tragedy. And with every Bitsy, there's a deeper thing that you can put in the show. And what we did next is pretty profound, which is bring death into LTW's life. Let's talk about that.
Well, that was actually your inspiration. You had suggested that at the end of last season that you said, what if LTW's father dies? And one of the things we do in the show is deal very much with where these women are in their stage of life. And quite frankly, for most people in this stage of life, that's when you are losing beloved parents. So it felt like a very juicy opportunity to give our actress, Nicole Ari Parker, a big emotional swing.
Based on the fact that we knew she would do amazingly well. And she has a great reserve of both drama and comedy. And in the beginning of this scene, you see it. I mean, talk about screwball comedy. She's nervous when Herbert suddenly stops by and she introduces Marion as married. Like
Because
that's all.
she's just learned.
She's
that he
just
got
like,
married.
she said, this is my editing partner married. And he just looks at her like, Lucy, what are you doing? And then Herbert asks for silence. And
there we are.
and there you are. And he tells her that Lawrence, her father, is dead. And wow.
Yeah.
And that she's not expecting it at all because he was healthy. And it's a shattering moment for her.
And the fact that she had silenced her phone meant that she missed the opportunity to, race out to the hospital
Yeah, the
to
guilt
say
of them
goodbye.
saying we've been calling and your phone's been off.
The one time
Yeah.
that you turn off your
Yeah.
phone is when you really need it to be
And
on.
sometimes writers don't need words. They need images and they need a director to tell them what the next level of feeling for the audience is. And it's after she hears the next image that Julie put into the show is this sort of gorgeous, haunted shot of her entering this colorful lush closet, and she throws down her red bottom shoes. And in that moment, you're like, well, yeah, fashion's not important anymore.
No.
Like
Yeah.
that used to be a thing. And now I'm
Sad is
dealing with the
sad,
real
right.
thing. And their shoes are thrown away. And she sits down and she calls Charlotte.
Yep. And they have this beautiful exchange.
I stupidly put my phone on silent mode to edit, so I never really got to say goodbye because of work.
Work that he raised you to do.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you for saying that.
You know, that thing when friends are there for you. And Kristen's performance is so appropriate and delicate, letting her go there. And then Nicole is like not histrionic, but almost wrung out, like she's been crying all day. And now comes the hardest thing of all. This is the 360-degree turn of all time. Going from the tears to outrage because of an email from a new character, Lucille Highwater, who runs her father's theater. Nicole said to me, called me up one day and said, did it work in the editing? Did it work? Because it's a big turn.
It's a big turn, but in the midst of death, these are the ridiculous moments that happen.
Yeah.
And I remember when my mother passed away, she passed away at home. I was completely wrung out. The funeral home had come to take her corpse away. And suddenly a policewoman showed up at the door to ascertain that there had been no foul play, as she said.
Oh, my God.
And my mother had been terminally ill for years. And I went instantly from complete devastation to, oh, hell no.
Yeah.
Who is this woman? And so she has that turn, which is...
It's the reason she needs to stop crying.
It is. And having had a similar, flip switch, it's like, phew, thank God I had that release.
Well, and you go from just being a puddle of tears to being warrior woman. This is not happening.
And another part of writing technically is that we then have to write the email. You know what I mean? There's so many layers.
Right.
Like we have to cut to the email to tell us the information. And then Susan has to write the words of this character, Lucille Highwater. First of all, she came up with the name Lucille Highwater, which the wording on the email basically has to tell you theater, lady, high water, and you get to see a photograph of her father, and it just tells you in that one cutaway, which is called, an insert of that, is writing all through this entire scene.
And for those who want to take a still, it starts with the words, I think, a great tree has fallen, which is, of course, an allusion to the Maya Angelou poem, When Great Trees Fall.
So what we've learned without even meeting her yet is Lucille Highwater is a thief. She steals from other people.
From Maya Angelou, no less.
And right after the Charlotte phone call with LTW, she has heard this terrible news that somebody has died, and she goes into Harry, who's in a game-watching mode, and she's filled with perspective.
An emotion, and hysterical perspective, one might add, because she's been reminded of the fragility of life. And
the comedy of you're blocking the game. But she does say to him, life is precious and we have to hold on to every minute. And yes, it's a comedy context, but it is very important. Charlotte realizes life is precious and we have to hold on to every moment. And that's a grown-up thought.
Well, to be confronted with your mortality and the person that you love most in the world's mortality.
And then he does the thing that he needs to do, which is, can I have Pollyanna back? And she immediately says yes. And she leaves and says, I love you. And he won't look at her.
Right.
he won't look at her. The dog looks at her leave, but Harry just keeps his eye on the TV.
Well, and that's also what you do in a relationship. You sort of take turns being the strong one and the weak one, right? Like he was strong, so she could break down in that moment.
Yeah.
And the other silent theme that comes through the show very thinly and sweetly is that Joy is silent about her feelings about children until the moment right before she meets Brady, when they're sitting out in that beautiful little outside cafe, and she admits to Miranda, I'm weird with other people's children. And to her credit, she says, I don't know if it's me or them.
But it's always
on,
awkward.
It's always
right?
awkward. Let's just say I'm on the fence. But what she says that it moves their characters along is, I've never had a girlfriend with children. And Miranda says, am I your girlfriend?
Which she loves hearing that.
And she says, why else would I be beating myself up in public? Yes, you are my girlfriend. And then Brady comes, sunlit with that amazing head of red hair, glistening. And you see Joy tense, like this is going to be awkward. And he immediately goes to the dogs.
And the dogs love him.
Right.
But it's
And there's
like,
absolutely no awkwardness.
no.
at all.
And
Right.
as soon as he's talking about the dogs and Miranda's
Their
introducing them and
names,
he says,
yeah.
best names ever. And she goes to Miranda, I'm off the fence.
Right.
And then he says, I should probably meet you too. And he goes, not necessary, Joy says.
They're all on the same frequency.
It's just
there's
such
no
a beautiful jewel of a scene because it's so short
Yeah.
and it says so much.
Yeah.
And then later we cut into Aiden desperately sitting at Carrie's computer. First time we've ever seen that. Working at Carrie's computer, and he's surfing, trying to find antique glass, desperate to fix what he cannot fix, looking for rainbows. And she comes in and basically says, the cat's in the other room. It's time for me and you. Come to bed. And he doesn't.
Yeah. Which should
Yeah.
I should tell you
Sent.
that's interesting because they usually just fall into bed. It's very natural.
Why is he not?
Right. Why is this night different from all other nights?
The subtext, as with Passover, is that he slept with his ex-wife.
Yeah.
But the reality is she goes off on her own, and then we cut, and he says, come to Scranton with me, which is another reality. That's where the antique Scranton had the antique glass place. It's not far away. And she said, I can't, I'm going to the Tiffany event.
Yep.
Okay, so then here we are. We're now in a movie. We're doing a strange, gorgeous, decadent shot of Tiffany and Company from outside, just
and by the way,
Fifth Avenue.
It doesn't even look like watching the cut. It doesn't. I promise you, everyone out there, that is 100% a real place. There's nothing. The background isn't fake. Everything is real.
You're seeing.
And talk about breakfast at Tiffany's.
yeah.
We were there at, I think, 6 in the morning is when the camera started rolling. And your hero of a writing partner and the director of this episode, Julie, got that exterior shot with 20 minutes to spare.
Yeah, I mean, it is gorgeous, and it's rare that we do a scene without dialogue that doesn't push the point, but just says, here's New York.
Oh, establishing
shot, yeah.
Without sound, they say.
Without sound. And then you go inside, and what you discover is Carrie says, Aiden and I didn't make love last night. And that he's gone to find glass, and Charlotte is already right on the edge of being fragile herself, starts crying, and Carrie's like, one of my favorite lines, wait a minute, what's happening? Are you crying about my French doors?
Also, that setting is such a perfect place for Charlotte to become so emotional because it's emblematic of marriage, getting your engagement ring. It's so resonant, Tiffany's.
Yeah.
Especially since she got her first engagement ring from the husband that was impotent there. I don't know where Harry got the ring that actually worked for her, but the idea then is you cut from this to Newark, and LTW's crossed the bridge to meet Lucille Highwater. Now here is, talk about a high water mark. Susan wrote this with Jennifer Lewis, the magnificent, comic, dramatic
Oh my
actress
God.
being in mind. She literally made couture dialogue thinking about Jennifer Lewis doing this part before we had Jennifer Lewis doing this part.
Which is a problem to construct your couture dress. What if you don't get the person? But we did, and we were so happy because she brought so many levels to this character who
Amazing.
is, as she's described, failed actress turned theater manager. And she's basically a woman who understudied every second tier part on Broadway.
Yeah. That's what she would tell you. She never got that close. Maybe she did some children's theater somewhere, but I don't know. Anyway, the point is the look of Lucille, aside from that, is, the dress. She's wearing pleather. Molly and Danny put her in zebra, red, and black pleather.
Her idea of morning wear.
Yeah. And of course, the Michael Kors as a I'm fancy too.
2, not to be outdone. And guess who gave it to me? Your daddy.
Yeah.
Because she's not just the theater manager, she's also his lover.
So the dynamic really here is the 2 women mourners, who's going to win? And Lucille needs it. And that's interesting because Lucille really is a work wife. It's another single woman who's lost something. Whatever reason, for 30 years, she's been building this relationship with him, and he's gone. She has no papers. She has no claim to him. It's like a widow that was never married. And what power does she have? So she's grabbing for something.
So just so you know, in my mind, her backstory was she had actually had a relationship with him early on, and then he dumped her for LTW's mother.
Oh.
Which she always bitterly resented. And then she was basically the woman waiting patiently and being his assistant. And then in basically his waning years, he finally invited her back into his bed. And so
Susan, your backstory.
I feel like it's important to tell the audience that this is the lore Susan creates for every, like she really
She has a backstory for the chicken and
She has a
waffles.
backstory for the backstory.
The chicken and waffles. She's like, the chicken and waffles
The
were
chicken
on
is
the
from a
shelf
farm.
for 20 minutes before Louvel came by. She has a backstory. Anyway, that's good writing. But the point is, Lucille needs attention. Attention must be paid, and they're competing. And what you see is she pushes it too far. When LTW says, that's it, you'll do it my way. Jennifer goes,
You got a lot of opinions for someone who was too busy to come say goodbye to a daddy on the last day of his life.
talk about getting the Achilles heel, because
Going
that
right
is
to
the substance of not only is LTW mourning the loss of her father, but her guilt over not being there.
So she agrees LTW is porous and emotional and empathetic enough to say, you can do something, it just can't be theatrical. And Lucille turns the water off and goes, so I'm in? Like it's all a performance.
It's a performance, but it's he was yours in life and he's going to be mine in death.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, then we come back to Aiden and Carrie. Now, this scene attention must be paid, literally, to this scene, which is Carrie comes home. Aiden has way too many doors. None of them have rainbows, and he is disconnected from her. He's walking around saying, I ruined it, and she says, come here. Samantha, we talked about the fact that when you saw the finished episode, you were so surprised at Carrie's reaction to the news.
Yeah.
That Aiden admits that he slept with Kathy.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I knew like how Carrie on paper was going to react, but the way SJ, I mean, just she looks like so wise and sage, and she looks completely sure of herself. And it really struck me that like, oh, our girl has like grown up. Like this is a woman who's not overreacting. I mean, I feel like 20 years ago, we could all have written the scene where Carrie like freaks out and then she calls all of the other girls and they go to the diner and have like a whole thing about it. But her knowing like, yeah, that makes sense and it's fine. Like seeing it on screen was really amazing.
I remember SJP also really appreciating, she always wants the character to reflect the maturity of this stage of life.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's also one of the big pleasures of writing this. To your point, 20 years ago, 30 years ago,
it
we
would
would have
look
written
different.
the scene at the diner, everybody gnashing their teeth.
Mhm.
And now it's...
And we, as writers, really talked for many, many, many sessions about how to lay out this reflection back to the original
Right.
agreement.
That's right, Elisa, yeah.
And how do we spread that through the season?
Mhm.
And you know, they talk about it in 2. They talk about their communication. What are the rules? You know, they keep like resetting the rules. And another thing I want to say is like, We knew that the audience, with Carrie and Aiden getting back together, were going to be waiting for, how is Carrie going to hurt him? What's she going to do to fuck it up this time? And so we had a challenge as writers to figure out, like, this has to be on Aiden. Like, this chapter of their relationship, he's got to be more of the flawed one. We have to see more of what his flaws are.
And still redeem him. As you have to understand, he can't be a bad guy.
Yes,
he has to be a human guy.
But this is what would happen. They're
yeah.
co-parents of this child. It's a horrible moment, and they would fall into bed together. And
right,
it's
out
also
of sadness.
Out of sadness.
Looking for comfort.
And looking for comfort.
And that's all fine. And the important thing in the scene that you were just talking about, Elisa, is that she says,
sleeping with Kathy, because you were upset, I understand. I'm just having a harder time understanding why we have not had this discussion until now.
and that's the thing, at the very, very epicenter of the weird question. Am I not supposed to sleep with anybody
this
else?
is where we reveal she doesn't know what she agreed to.
Right.
She thinks she agreed
does.
to, I can do whatever I want. And he's like, I betrayed our trust.
Right.
It's like, what? He said, and then you realize, oh no, he's in Camelot. And that's why she references this is medieval or male. And she's realistically going, you can't possibly.
They sign different contracts.
And she tells him, I don't want to sleep with other people. I want to sleep with you. You get that. And he's overwhelmed. And she pulls him in and kisses him. And then they do the only thing they can do to solve it, go to the place of forgiveness by having sex and making love. And that beautiful nonverbal scene leads us into, if we're making fun of Lucille Highwater, and if we're planning to do a slightly antic funeral, we had to establish that there's a real grief and real dignity in this family, and that LTW has really lost her father. And that's why we have the nonverbal scene of them going to
and you came up with that beautiful tableau
of them
which is so
leaving
cinematic and so dignified, and I think will have a lot of resonance for a lot of people who...
The family getting into the cars.
The family getting into the car, impeccably dressed, and basically just a portrait in dignity and elegance and nobility.
Because if you know you're going to go a little bit comedy, a lot comedy in the next moment, you've got to go dignity here. You have to show people this is a real thing. This is a real family with an enormous sense of honor and themselves.
And we have to give the nod to our incredible costumer, Molly, who commissioned, talk about couture, commissioning that perfect suit that's so Jackie O. And there's a mini-me version for mother and daughter.
That's my favorite
thing. And her inspiration was very much Jackie O.
And then we go into the funeral and we get that beautiful evocative moment of LTW seeing her father's ashes, and everything's beautiful and tasteful. And now here comes the comedy. Here comes Lucille with her other Michael Kors bag. She has to brag she has many. And she basically says, break a leg.
You have 3 minutes to
It's
speak.
a funeral and it will be fabulous. And she says, Mike King says, like that no one ever got bad getting out of the theater early. And then we cut outside now that we've sort of broken the tension. Eunice comes in and she also breaks the tension by being mean, which is her character.
Which is comforting on that day.
And then here come the clowns outside.
And Sema. These shoes not made for walking.
Here she comes.
On the PATH train for the first time in her life.
She's limping. Anthony's talking about what's happening. And then Carrie and Aiden come down the street and you see, they're walking and he has the bad suit on because he wanted to go with her.
Nothing is funnier than those short pants.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of that is a bit of a reach, but the reason we put him in the suit is we wanted him to sit and split his pants and as he says, expose my big and tall. But because we wanted to show that in grown-up relationships, in real relationships, you go through very intense things of pain, and then grown-ups come through them and there's still room to laugh. We wanted the audience to see that they're still laughing even though they had that awful discovery.
And it heals the relationship.
It does. And then you do the funeral and it all seems right until Lucille comes out doing the Pippin.
Because she's performing every role she failed to get on Broadway.
Pippin, the revival. The Ben Vereen version and the revival.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, it's all there so that Anthony can say, a Pippin funeral, Pippin funeral. And LTW knows, oh, this isn't what I signed up for. And then, of course, Susan Fales-Hill, you see the post office players.
Well, we have to explain what this theater is. It's the
Yes.
Newark Free Theater, which is a community theater. And the idea is to bring theater to the people. So they will all work at the post office, and they are actors by the avocation.
And,
So-
shows are always too long, and you always have to cut. And the one thing I was like, I'll be damned if I cut the post office players. That's pure Susan. I'm like, I'm keeping. They delivered. But then she introduces LTW, and LTW gets up. And we all know she has a slight problem with public speaking.
isn't her thing.
And she asks Herbert to come up with her. And she gets choked up.
because someone says your father was always there. And she's been reminded over and over again, and she knows she wasn't there.
Right.
And so she just, all she can focus on and talk about is the fact that she wasn't there in that moment.
And there were a lot more hijinks that went on in the filming that Julie did expertly. But then when I got in the editing room, I realized what's really important here is the LTW Eunice moment. There wasn't a lot. Sometimes a show just overflows the cup. You're like, oh, that's too much in that cup. But we got enough with Pippin. But when she says, I wasn't there, and that beautiful shot of Eunice looking down.
And it's the first moment that mother-in-law and daughter-in-law have an emotional connection, because Eunice, you can see, is registering her own pain. And again, back to backstory in my own mind, Eunice, the mother-in-law, was very close to her father. And for the first time, she really sees her daughter-in-law as a human being who's in enormous pain. And that absolutely brings her back to when she lost her own father.
Right. And then they have this moment outside where she gives her a beautiful linen handkerchief and gives her the spiritual thing from
Which
Eunice.
somebody said to me, actually, because my mother was terminally ill. And someone said, if you're not there when she passes away, it will mean she didn't want you there. And so that's a big comfort. When you're a devoted child, you feel like, I need to be there in the moment.
Right,
And so she
right.
gives her the gift of saying, it's not about the moment of death. It's the moment of,
Right.
it's all the life.
And how I'm really glad we found a humanizing moment for Eunice, because she's been this really fun
Yeah, me too.
foil for 3 seasons now, and she is a person, and she
had
would have
right, but
a moment of grace.
She does
and-
lean back into herself when she says,
Yeah.
have it laundered by
By
hand.
hand.
Of course.
Like, don't throw this in the wash
Yeah.
like you are going to.
Right.
Anyway, and then you cut back into the theater and you see Carrie and Aiden, and they have to walk out with her behind him, so you can't. Now, this is a screwball comedy. In Bringing Up Baby, Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant walk out because he splits his pants. They walk out just like this. This is an homage to that, but really what it is, he says, stay close, and she says, always. And then you cut to them in bed the next morning, and he's leaving, and he says, I'll call you when I get home, and she says,
You are home.
and then it's a happy ending for them until he goes downstairs to get
a
coffee, and click, 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 up the stairs comes, by the way, 6'5" Jonathan Cake, 6'5" John Corbett,
Eye to eye.
eye to eye. And he's like, this is Dunkin' Donuts who lives downstairs? And he says, here, doesn't even know his name, says, here, give this to Carrie, we're doing this. And you just see the next thought on Aiden's face is, what's that about? And then Carrie wakes up, the window's fixed, the table that she got from him is glistening. She looks like she's on Mount Olympus in heaven, and she comes in and she sees Duncan's book is on the table. She has no idea how it got there, but in her mind you see, he met Duncan. And then you cut to the Tums moment, and she finds Charlotte downtown.
Charlotte with her Jackie O sunglasses,
Yeah.
thinking she's incognito.
Right. That's
'Cause
all you need.
She doesn't
Stocking up
want
on Depends.
buying adult male Depends, which is what Carrie is asking why. And then Charlotte breaks.
Harry has prostate cancer. he doesn't want anyone to know or to find out. So that's why I'm all the way down here. And please, forget that I told you. I'm only telling you because you saw the depend.
And again, back to friendship.
Mm-hmm.
SJP says the beautiful line that you actually pitched, I'm your vault.
Yeah, because, you're immediately thinking about how Charlotte was there for Carrie when Big died. There's, like whatever you need in this time, not that Harry's going to die, we think, and then Kristen really lets it go.
Yeah.
And the contrast of this deep emotion under those neon lights in a drugstore holding Tums and Depends is something that I think is really special. So in that episode, we explored death, life, flirting,
Mature relationships.
and silence and talking. And just like that, we've reached the end of episode 6 of season 3. Thanks so much to Elisa, Susan, and Samantha for joining at the table. We'll be back next week with episode 7, They Want to Have Fun. Oh, that sounds fun. And as ever, you can stream new episodes of In Just Like That Thursdays on Max. And Just Like That, The Writer's Room is produced by Sony Music Podcasts for Max. At Sony, Sharon Morris is the executive producer, Gianna Palmer is the lead producer, Sammy Allison is head of production. Tamika Balance-Kalasny is our production manager, and Sam Baer is our engineer. Special thanks to Becky Rowe, Allison Cohen-Sorokach, Kenya Reyes, and Aaron Kelly from the Max podcast team. Thank you for listening.